Have you ever met someone who thought their self-importance could bulldoze over your peace and quiet? Someone who saw a little authority as a license to control everyone else's life, right down to the color of your front door? Yeah, I've been there, and let me tell you, it's an experience that'll test the limits of your patience, your creativity, and your sense of humor, all at the same time. My name's Arthur Ainsworth, and though I usually keep to myself, this story, well, it's too wild not to share. I bought my lakeside cabin to escape exactly the kind of nonsense I'm about to describe. The cabin, and the whole valley around it, were supposed to be my safe haven, a place where the only drama came from the weather, or maybe a wandering deer. Instead, I found myself face to face with the human embodiment of a power trip, Carol Peterson, though in my mind, she'll always be HOA Karen. Now, Carol wasn't content to simply enjoy her retirement. No, she'd appointed herself as the queen of the Lakeview Estates Homeowners Association, a title she wore like armor. For a while, I managed to fly under her radar, just quietly enjoying the solitude. That ended one bright morning when I looked out across the lake and saw blue and red lights dancing on the water. Two sheriff's deputies got out, hats in hand, looking sheepish as they explained they'd gotten a complaint about unauthorized construction and suspicious activity. And guess who filed the complaint? Carol, of course. The best part was, her jurisdiction didn't actually extend to my property at all. See, Lakeview Estates is a cluster of homes barely clinging to the northern rim of my valley, like barnacles on a whale. My land, Lakeview Valley, is the whale. But Carol, blissfully ignorant of the real boundaries, had decided she could lay down the law here, too. I showed the deputies my paperwork, the deeds, the maps, the whole boring binder of proof. They apologized and left, probably rolling their eyes at what they figured was just another neighborly misunderstanding. I hoped that'd be the end of it. But if you know a single thing about HOAs or about people like Carol, you know it wasn't. Days later, I got a letter dressed up to look official, with a shaky Lakeview Estates logo and a laundry list of my supposed violations. Reclaimed barnwood siding, wildflowers instead of trimmed grass, and, my favorite, failure to submit architectural plans for review. I tried to resolve it the easy way. I called her up, calmly explained that my property wasn't part of the HOA. She replied with the kind of patronizing tone only someone who thinks they're untouchable can muster, insisting that all properties bordering the lake fall under HOA standards. You know what I mean? It was like talking to a wall, one that actively insulted your intelligence. At that point, the accountant in me kicked in. If Carol wanted to play games with rules, I was more than ready to learn every rule in the book, and then some. I started digging. County records, plat maps, corporate filings, even old HOA meeting notes from the local historical society's dusty archives. Turns out, the Lakeview Estates HOA had been officially dissolved over 25 years ago. No active nonprofit, no legal authority, just a handful of forgotten covenants about house size and commercial activity. Nothing that gave Carol or anyone else the right to collect dues, issue fines, or threaten liens. Here's where it gets interesting. Twist number one. Carol wasn't even a part of the old association. She'd only moved in 7 years back. So what was this HOA she was running? Turns out, it was something she'd more or less invented, either out of ignorance or, more troubling, as a deliberate scam. She'd been collecting dues for road maintenance from the neighbors, money that, as I'd soon learn, went straight into her personal checking account. With all this information, I could have just gone straight to a lawyer or the sheriff. But honestly, where's the fun in that? There's a certain satisfaction in exposing a bully with nothing but facts and giving them enough rope to tie their own knot. I decided to play along. Carol, blissfully unaware, kept doubling down. She sent another final warning by certified mail, $250 due in fines, or she'd place a lien on my property. The gall was unreal. She even started talking around town about the new guy by the lake who thought he was above the rules. I just kept gathering my evidence and waited for her next move. Then came the invitation. Well, more like a summons, to the next HOA meeting. Carol probably pictured herself presiding like a judge at a show trial, ready to bring the unruly cabin owner to heel in front of the neighbors. But I had other plans. Before the meeting, I sent an anonymous letter to the Lakeview Estates HOA, warning them, her that any further attempts to collect fees or levy fines without real authority could be considered fraud. I didn't sign my name, just wanted to plant a seed of doubt to see how she'd react. Word came back to me through the grapevine. Carol was indignant, loudly declaring she had every right to do what she was doing. Classic. The night of the meeting, I showed up 10 minutes late, letting her get good and comfortable in her role as Empress. When I walked in, Carol was mid-monologue about the threat to community standards. The audience, maybe 7 people, looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. When she spotted me, her face lit up. She couldn't wait to bring the hammer down. She spent a good 5 minutes reading off my offenses, then demanded to know if I had anything to say. I stood up, portfolio in hand, and said I did. I walked to the front, laid out my documents, and calmly explained to everyone present, step by step, how I not only owned my property, but the entire valley, including the land their street sat on. I showed them the dissolution certificate for the HOA, the county maps, the covenants, everything. I explained that any fines or dues she'd collected were not only unenforceable, but possibly illegal. You could have heard a pin drop. Carol's face turned every color in the crayon box, red, white, and finally a kind of blotchy purple. When I brought up the fraud angle, one of the neighbors piped up, "Carol, you told us those dues were for road maintenance." That was the tipping point. The spell broke. The audience turned. Carol, once so certain of her power, gathered her papers and left, humiliated and silent. The fallout was quick. A few neighbors started asking questions about the money they'd paid. Turns out, Carol had been pocketing it for years, using her authority to scare people into compliance. No one pressed charges. There wasn't enough at stake for a courtroom drama, but she was forced to return what she'd taken. Her reputation never recovered. The HOA signs disappeared, and so did Carol, at least from public life. Peace returned to the valley, deeper than before. The air felt lighter, and I, for the first time in months, could sit by the lake at sunset without worrying about drama. There's a certain justice in seeing a bully's power melt away in the face of undeniable truth, delivered not with anger, but with patience, precision, and just the right amount of irony. The lesson? Don't mistake someone's silence for weakness. And never underestimate the person who just wants to be left alone. Sometimes, they own the whole damn valley. So, have you ever seen someone get their comeuppance, not through shouting or violence, but just by being calmly, relentlessly right? I'd love to hear your stories. Let's talk about it below. Where do you draw the line between standing up for yourself and letting things slide? When does a community rule become a tool for control? Let me know what you think, because at the end of the day, justice tastes best when it's served cold and maybe just a little bit sweet.